Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you will change how you see power forever. The world is not a playground where good intentions and kind gestures guarantee success. The world is a battlefield where the strong survive and the weak are consumed. Thomas Hobbes understood this truth centuries ago when he declared that life in its natural state is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. He wasn't being pessimistic, he was being realistic. And if you want to thrive in this reality, you must first accept it completely. The greatest mistake you can make is believing that everyone operates from the same moral framework as you. They don't. While you're busy being fair, honest, and considerate, others are calculating how to use your goodness against you. This isn't cynicism. This is survival intelligence. The person who acknowledges this fundamental truth about human nature gains an immediate advantage over those who live in denial. Power doesn't care about your feelings, your background, or your good intentions. Power recognizes only one thing: strength. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think strength means being loud, aggressive, or domineering. They think power means forcing others to submit through intimidation and threats. This is the strategy of the weak pretending to be strong. True power operates differently. True power is silent, calculated, and absolute. It doesn't need to announce itself because it's already established. It doesn't need to threaten because the threat is implicit in its very presence. Consider how a master chess player operates. They don't slam pieces on the board or shout at their opponent. They sit quietly, analyzing, calculating, moving with precision. Their opponent feels the pressure, not from what they say, but from what they represent. Superior strategy, deeper thinking, inevitable victory. This is the essence of silent authority. It's not what you do that creates respect and fear. It's who you are. Hobbes taught us that in the state of nature, every man is at war with every other man. This war doesn't end when we form societies. It simply becomes more sophisticated. The office, the social circle, the family dinner table, these are all battlegrounds where power dynamics play out constantly. The person who recognizes this and adapts accordingly will always have an advantage over those who believe in the fantasy of universal cooperation and goodwill. Your silence, when used strategically, becomes your greatest weapon. When others are explaining, justifying, and pleading, you remain quiet. When they're making excuses, you simply observe. When they're trying to fill the uncomfortable space with words, you let that space exist. This silence creates psychological pressure that forces others to reveal their true intentions, their weaknesses, their desperation. They will talk themselves into corners while you gather intelligence. But this isn't about being antisocial or cruel. This is about understanding that respect is earned through demonstration, not through explanation. The person who constantly explains their decisions, their actions, their worth, is signaling that they themselves doubt these things. The person who acts with quiet confidence, who makes decisions without seeking validation, who moves through the world with purposeful silence, this person commands attention and respect naturally. Human beings are pack animals, and like all pack animals, we instinctively recognize hierarchy. We can sense strength and weakness within moments of meeting someone. This recognition happens below the level of conscious thought. It's primal, evolutionary, unstoppable. The person who carries themselves with quiet authority triggers this recognition immediately. Others may not be able to articulate why they respect or fear this person, but they feel it in their bones. This is why your presence matters more than your words. Your posture, your eye contact, your breathing, your movement, these communicate volumes before you ever open your mouth. When you walk into a room, are you seeking approval or commanding attention? When someone challenges you, are you immediately defensive or calmly confident? When faced with conflict, are you rushed to respond or comfortable with strategic silence? Machiavelli understood that it's better to be feared than loved, but he also understood that the ideal is to be both feared and respected without being hated. This delicate balance requires sophisticated understanding of human psychology. You must be strong enough that others know challenging you carries consequences, but not so harsh that you create enemies who will work against you from the shadows. The modern world has made us soft. We've been taught to be nice, to be agreeable, to avoid conflict at all costs. These teachings serve the interests of those who want to keep you weak and manageable. A person who is afraid of conflict, who avoids difficult conversations, who prioritizes being liked over being respected, this person will never have real power. They will always be at the mercy of those who are willing to embrace the uncomfortable truths about human nature. But embracing these truths doesn't mean becoming a monster. It means becoming strategic. It means understanding that your kindness, when given freely to everyone, becomes worthless. Your time, when available to anyone who asks, becomes cheap. Your attention, when scattered across countless distractions, becomes powerless. Scarcity creates value. Selectivity creates respect. When you speak, make your words count. When you give your time, make it meaningful. When you show kindness, make it deliberate. The person who is selectively generous, strategically helpful, and deliberately present has far more impact than the person who is constantly available and universally accommodating. People value what they can't easily obtain, and they respect what they can't easily manipulate. This is the paradox of power that Nietzsche understood so well. The person who needs power least is the person who wields it most effectively. The person who is desperate for approval, who seeks validation from others, who needs to be liked, this person has already surrendered their power to external forces. But the person who is complete within themselves, who doesn't need approval or validation, who can stand alone if necessary, this person naturally attracts followers and respect. Your silence, your self-possession, your inner confidence, these create a gravitational field that draws others toward you. They want to understand you, to gain your approval, to be part of your inner circle. This attraction isn't manipulation. It's natural human behavior. We're drawn to strength, to certainty, to people who seem to know something we don't. But here's the crucial point. This strength must be real, not performed. People can sense authenticity versus acting. If you're putting on a show, if you're trying to appear stronger than you are, if you're mimicking confidence without possessing it, you will be exposed. True power comes from genuine self-development, from facing your fears, from accepting responsibility for your life completely. The person who has done the inner work, who has faced their demons and emerged stronger, who has accepted their flaws and worked to transcend them, this person carries an aura of quiet authority that cannot be faked. They don't need to prove anything to anyone because they've already proven everything to themselves. They don't need to win every argument because they're secure in their own judgment. They don't need to be right about everything because they're confident in their ability to adapt and learn. This is what separates true leaders from petty tyrants. The tyrant rules through fear and intimidation because they're insecure. The true leader commands respect through competence and character. The tyrant needs constant validation and submission from others. The true leader is complete within themselves and empowers others to grow. But make no mistake, even the most benevolent leader must be willing to use force when necessary. Even the most compassionate person must be capable of ruthlessness when the situation demands it. The capacity for violence, kept in check by wisdom and restraint, is what makes peace possible. The ability to destroy, combined with the choice not to, is what creates true respect. This is why your silence is so powerful. It suggests depth, mystery, hidden capabilities. When you speak little, others assume you're thinking much. When you reveal little, others assume you're hiding strength. When you react little, others assume you're above their petty concerns. This assumption, whether accurate or not, creates psychological pressure that works in your favor. The person who is always explaining themselves, always justifying their actions, always seeking approval, this person appears weak and desperate. But the person who acts with quiet confidence, who makes decisions without extensive explanation, who moves through the world with purposeful silence, this person appears strong and self-contained. Appearance matters because it shapes how others treat you, and how others treat you shapes your reality. You must understand that most people are living in a state of quiet desperation. They're uncertain about their choices, insecure about their worth, anxious about their future. When they encounter someone who appears calm, confident, and certain, they naturally defer to that person's judgment. They want to be around that person, to learn from them, to gain some of their apparent strength. This is not manipulation. This is natural human hierarchy asserting itself. Throughout history, groups have survived by following the strongest, smartest, most capable individuals. This instinct hasn't disappeared in our modern world. It's simply become more subtle. The person who develops genuine strength and confidence will naturally attract followers and respect. But with this power comes responsibility. The person who can influence others, who can command respect and fear, who can shape outcomes through their presence, this person must use these abilities wisely. Power without wisdom is destructive. Strength without compassion is tyranny. Influence without responsibility is evil. This is why you must develop your inner strength alongside your outer influence. You must face your own fears, your own weaknesses, your own capacity for both good and evil. You must understand your own motivations, your own blind spots, your own potential for corruption. Only through this self-knowledge can you wield power responsibly. The person who seeks power for its own sake, who wants to dominate others for personal gratification, who uses their influence to serve only themselves, this person will ultimately destroy themselves and everything they touch. But the person who develops power to serve a higher purpose, who builds influence to create positive change, who uses their strength to protect and empower others, this person builds something lasting and meaningful. Your silence, your presence, your quiet authority, these are tools, not toys. They can be used to build or destroy, to heal or harm, to elevate or degrade. The choice is yours, but the choice comes with consequences. Power is immoral. It amplifies who you really are underneath all the social conditioning and self-deception. This is why the development of character is inseparable from the development of power. The person who seeks to influence others must first learn to influence themselves. The person who wants to command respect must first learn to respect themselves. The person who desires to lead others must first learn to lead their own life with purpose and direction. The world is indeed a battlefield, but it's not a random or chaotic one. It operates according to natural laws, psychological principles, and evolutionary imperatives. The person who understands these laws and aligns with them has a tremendous advantage over those who fight against reality. The person who accepts human nature as it is, rather than as they wish it were, can work with that nature rather than against it. Your silence, your self-possession, your inner strength, these are not tactics or techniques. They are expressions of who you are at your core. They cannot be learned from a book or copied from another person. They must be developed through experience, through challenge, through the consistent choice to grow stronger rather than remain comfortable. The person who emerges from this process of self-development carries an unmistakable aura of quiet authority. They don't need to announce their strength because it's evident in everything they do. They don't need to create fear because their very presence suggests capability and resolve. They don't need to seek respect because their actions command it naturally. This is the silent strategy for dominance that Hobbes would recognize and approve of. Not dominance over others for its own sake, but dominance over circumstances, over challenges, over the chaos and uncertainty that life presents. The person who has achieved this level of self-mastery becomes a force of nature, calm in crisis, decisive in uncertainty, unshakable in the face of adversity. And in a world full of people who are desperately seeking someone to follow, someone to trust, someone to depend on, the person who has developed this quiet authority will never lack for influence, respect, or opportunity. They become the eye of the storm, the fixed point around which everything else revolves. The silent center of power that others instinctively recognize and defer to. The choice is yours. You can remain among the masses, seeking approval, avoiding conflict, living in comfortable weakness. Or you can embrace the uncomfortable truths about human nature, develop your inner strength, and claim your place among those who shape, rather than are shaped by the world around them. The path is difficult, but the destination is worth every challenge you'll face along the way. But let me be even more specific about what this transformation requires, because understanding the philosophy is only the beginning. Implementation is where most people fail. They read about power, they understand the concepts intellectually, but they never make the fundamental changes necessary to embody these principles. They want the results without paying the price, the respect without earning it, the authority without developing the character that makes authority sustainable. The first truth you must internalize is that your current self, with all its habits, fears, and limitations, is the product of a lifetime of conditioning designed to make you manageable. From childhood, you were taught to seek permission, to avoid making waves, to prioritize being liked over being respected. These teachings were not accidents. They serve the interests of those who benefit from your compliance. Every institution you've encountered, from school to workplace to social groups, has reinforced the message that conformity is safety and deviation is dangerous. This conditioning runs so deep that most people mistake it for their authentic personality. They believe their need for approval is natural, their fear of conflict is wisdom, their avoidance of difficult conversations is kindness. But these are not personality traits. They are learned behaviors that can be unlearned. The person who recognizes this distinction has taken the first step toward genuine freedom. Your silence, when deployed strategically, becomes a tool for deprogramming both yourself and others. When you refuse to fill uncomfortable silences with nervous chatter, you force yourself to become comfortable with discomfort. When you stop explaining and justifying your decisions to people who have no authority over your life, you begin to reclaim your personal sovereignty. When you allow others to reveal themselves through their need to fill the void with words, you gain invaluable intelligence about their true motivations and weaknesses. But this process is not comfortable. Your conditioning will fight back. Every time you choose silence over explanation, every time you walk away from an argument you don't need to win, every time you refuse to seek validation from people whose opinions don't matter, you will feel internal resistance. This resistance is not intuition telling you to stop. It's the voice of your programmed weakness trying to keep you small and safe. The person who pushes through this resistance, who continues to choose strength over comfort, who persists in developing their inner authority despite the discomfort, this person begins to experience a fundamental shift in how the world responds to them. Suddenly, people listen more carefully when they speak. Suddenly, their opinions carry more weight in group discussions. Suddenly, they find themselves being consulted on important decisions and included in conversations that matter. This shift happens not because they've learned new techniques or strategies, but because they've changed their fundamental relationship with power. They've stopped seeing themselves as victims of circumstance and started seeing themselves as creators of their reality. They've stopped hoping others will give them respect and started commanding it through their presence and actions. Nietzsche wrote about the will to power as the fundamental driving force of all life, but most people misunderstand this concept. They think it means the desire to dominate others, to accumulate external power for its own sake. This is a shallow interpretation. The will to power is really the drive to become who you truly are, to actualize your potential, to overcome the limitations that keep you small and weak. The person who has developed this authentic will to power doesn't need to diminish others to feel strong. They don't need to win every argument to feel smart. They don't need constant validation to feel worthy. They have found their center, their core, their unshakable foundation. And from this position of inner strength, they can engage with the world without being controlled by it. This is why your reputation becomes so important, and why it must be built deliberately and protected carefully. Every interaction you have, every decision you make, every response you give, these are all deposits in the bank of your reputation. The person who is consistent, who can be counted on to act with strength and integrity, who doesn't change their principles based on convenience or pressure, this person builds a reputation that precedes them into every room they enter. When your reputation is strong enough, your silence becomes even more powerful because people know it's backed by demonstrated capability. They know that your quietness is not weakness, but confidence. They know that your restraint is not fear, but control. They know that when you do speak or act, it will be purposeful and significant. But building this reputation requires you to make hard choices that others won't make. It requires you to stand up for your principles even when it costs you something. It requires you to speak truth even when lies would be easier. It requires you to maintain your standards even when others are lowering theirs. This consistency, maintained over time, creates a gravitational field of respect and authority that draws opportunities and allies toward you. The weak person is inconsistent, strong one day, weak the next, principled in some situations but compromising in others. This inconsistency creates uncertainty in others about who they're really dealing with, and uncertainty breeds distrust. But the person who is the same in private as in public, who maintains their standards regardless of circumstances, who can be counted on to act according to their stated values, this person creates the psychological safety that allows others to trust and follow them. Your silence, your consistency, your unwavering commitment to your own standards, these create what psychologists call psychological safety in others. Paradoxically, by being someone others can't manipulate or control, you become someone they can trust and rely on. By being predictably strong, you make others feel secure in your presence. By being willing to stand alone if necessary, you create the conditions where others want to stand with you. This is the deepest paradox of power that most people never understand. The person who needs others least is the person others most want to be around. The person who is most willing to walk away is the person others will work hardest to keep. The person who is most complete within themselves is the person who most naturally attracts community and connection. But achieving this level of self-possession requires you to confront the deepest fears that keep most people trapped in weakness. The fear of being alone, the fear of being rejected, the fear of being wrong, the fear of being judged. These fears are what make people desperate for approval, willing to compromise their values, eager to explain and justify themselves to anyone who questions them. The person who has faced these fears and worked through them, who has learned to be comfortable with solitude, who has accepted that rejection and judgment are inevitable parts of life, who has made peace with their own fallibility, this person is liberated from the need for external validation. They become truly free, and freedom is the foundation of all genuine power. This freedom manifests in your daily interactions in subtle but profound ways. When someone tries to manipulate you through guilt, you remain unmoved. When someone attempts to control you through fear, you respond with calm confidence. When someone seeks to diminish you through criticism, you neither defend nor attack. You simply continue being who you are. This consistency, this unshakability, this refusal to be pulled into other people's dramas and emotional manipulations, this is what true strength looks like. And here's what happens when you embody this level of strength consistently over time. The world begins to organize itself around you rather than against you. People stop testing you because they know the result. They stop trying to manipulate you because they know it won't work. They stop challenging your authority because they recognize it as genuine. You become a fixed point of stability in a chaotic world, and fixed points naturally attract everything else into orbit around them. Your words, when you do choose to speak, carry exponentially more weight because they're rare and therefore valuable. Your attention, when you give it, is treasured because it's selective and therefore meaningful. Your approval, when you offer it, creates loyalty because it's earned and therefore precious. Scarcity creates value in all aspects of life, including your personal interactions and relationships. But perhaps most importantly, your silence creates space for truth to emerge. In a world full of noise, distraction, and deception, the person who can be still and quiet creates a vacuum that truth naturally fills. When you're not talking, you're observing. When you're not explaining, you're understanding. When you're not reacting, you're analyzing. This depth of perception gives you insights that others miss, advantages that others don't see, opportunities that others overlook. The person who has mastered the art of strategic silence becomes like a hunter in the forest, moving carefully, observing constantly, acting only when the moment is right. They see patterns that others miss because they're not distracted by their own need to be heard. They understand motivations that others don't grasp because they're not projecting their own insecurities onto every situation. They recognize opportunities that others overlook because they're not consumed by their own emotional reactions. This is the ultimate expression of what Hobbes understood about human nature. We are all in competition, whether we acknowledge it or not. But the competition is not ultimately about defeating others. It's about becoming the best version of ourselves. The person who wins this internal competition, who masters themselves completely, automatically wins the external competition as well. Not through aggression or manipulation, but through the natural authority that comes from genuine strength and self-possession. The world needs people like this. People who have done the inner work, who have faced their demons and emerged stronger, who can stand as examples of what's possible when someone commits completely to their own development. In a time when most people are lost, confused, and desperately seeking leadership, the person who has found their own center becomes a beacon that others naturally follow. Your silence, your strength, your unwavering commitment to growth and excellence. These are not just personal qualities. They are gifts to the world, contributions to the collective elevation of human consciousness and capability. When you refuse to be weak, you give others permission to be strong. When you refuse to be manipulated, you show others that manipulation doesn't have to work. When you refuse to compromise your principles, you demonstrate that integrity is possible, even in a compromised world. This is your responsibility and your opportunity. The choice to develop genuine power, to embody authentic authority, to become someone who shapes rather than is shaped by circumstances. This choice is available to you right now, in this moment. But it requires you to abandon the comfortable lies you've been telling yourself about why change is impossible, why growth is too hard, why strength is beyond your reach. The truth is that everything you need to transform yourself already exists within you. The courage, the wisdom, the determination, The resilience. These are not external resources you must acquire. They are internal capacities you must develop and express. The person who commits to this development, who chooses growth over comfort day after day, who persists through setbacks and obstacles and failures, this person inevitably becomes someone who commands respect, attracts opportunity, and influences outcomes. Your silent strategy for dominance begins with the decision to stop being dominated by your own weaknesses, your own fears, your own need for approval and validation. It continues with the daily practice of choosing strength over comfort, truth over convenience, growth over stagnation, and it culminates in the emergence of a presence so powerful, so authentic, so unshakable that words become unnecessary. Your very being becomes your message. Your existence becomes your argument. Your life becomes your proof that transformation is not only possible but inevitable for those who commit to the path completely.